It's the Tuesday of a new week post the All Blacks dismissal of Italy 96 points to 17. 96-17, probably not what we were expecting. I was informed by someone on this YouTube channel that in the previous Six Nations, Italy had lost by an average of 12 points. They lost all their matches, but it was only 12 points. So what would you expect when they took on the All Blacks? Probably not the best part of 80 points. So something that was pretty decisive for the All Blacks and should mean they're in the knockouts. Should mean there are no issues there in terms of the table and what transpires with the last round as they take on Uruguay and Italy have France. However, as I think about the knockouts and as I've been considering that context, it has been encouraged because in my part of the world, maybe in your part of the world, the AFL and the NRL, Australian rules and rugby league, the local competition, the club competition in this part of the world. A New Zealand team takes part in the NRL and the rugby league and made the second to last, or second to last is probably the best way of saying it, the penultimate round. What you'd say are the semi-finals in rugby league terminology, or rugby union, excuse me. The preliminary finals. Spit it out, Johnny King. And they didn't make it through to the grand final. In Australian rules, they had preliminary finals as well, but there's no New Zealand team to take part. But I am one who enjoys his Aussie rules, who enjoys his AFL. And so I watch both codes, or three codes even, including rugby union. I watch all codes in the club competitions that take part. However, as I think about and I think forward to the playoffs, the knockouts, to the big matches of Rugby World Cup 2023, I was encouraged to consider how the various factors and parts and moments will translate into who decides and who defines who wins. And it was through these two matches, through these two contests. And let me talk a little bit about them. Let me give you a bit of a background or a bit of a context in terms of how they unfolded, especially if you didn't or haven't seen or viewed each or either. In the AFL, just over 100,000 people filled the MCG. We're a local side, a local team, probably the biggest in AFL that has over 100,000 members, paid members, paying for the privilege. That's going to help your bottom line, isn't it? They packed it out, and there were certainly some from Brisbane. It was Collingwood, the Pies, Collingwood Magpies versus the Brisbane Lions. So you had two sides there who were 1 and 2 after the regular season, and actually 1 and 2 in both of the competitions, if I can bring it in now. So it was a matchup that were with two sides who had shown some form. I think the Lions had beaten the Pies twice this year. So two matches. One was at maybe Marvel Stadium and one was at the Gabba. So one in Melbourne, one in Brisbane, although not at the home ground for the Pies. So a lot was expected of it. Most were giving the Pies the advantage, being at the MCG and all that could mean. However, right near the end, the 4 points between the sides. If you know AFL, then if you kick it in between the two middle posts, without touching those two middle posts, you get 6 points. If you hit the two middle posts, but get it inside the two outside posts, then it's 1 point. So, if you like, one main score would have meant that Brisbane would have taken the grand final. And so there's about a minute, just over a minute left. They were behind by 10 points at one stage, the Lions. And then just over a minute to go, they kicked a goal to bring it down to 4 points. So it was all on tension. There was so much tension in this match. And there was one call, an umpiring call, where they called play on. But generally in AFL, play on is defined or encouraged. The umpires will look to the side that's been offended, and if they're playing on with intention, then that's how they call it. If they're not, or if there's no clear advantage, they bring it back. So the lines are just outside what the 50 sort of, okay, you could say half circle, the 50 metre, and that's the sort of the significant sort of line in the sand, if you want. Only someone who can kick really well will will probably try and make it from outside that sort of area. And so they had a penalty just outside. So they weren't kicking. They probably wouldn't have been looking to kick for goal, but they would have had an opportunity. If I can untie my lips, to kick deep and mark, and they goal, and then it's likely a grand final for the Lions. Well, the umps don't call it. The umps call play on, I should say. And it's clearly the Lions aren't playing on with intention. They haven't really heard the call. I think that's what the explanation is. And so they play on. It doesn't work out. The Pies win the grand final, and we look back. That's really not my point of emphasis about this grand final, which made me think about the Rugby World Cup. It was really the small moments that happened at the end of the first and the end of the second quarter. Basically, the last plays of each of those, where Collingwood kicked 2 goals. Basically, kicked 2 goals after the final siren, or after the siren to signal the end of the quarter. And I thought to myself, you take even just one of those out of there. I mean, those are in such small, fine moments where it's so easy to look past those, and yet they separated. Brisbane being able to win, and Collingwood eventually taking the flag as it's defined, the premiership, the trophy, the champions for the AFL season. And AFL is such that the culture is so strong and so vital that it seems to take on like next level proportions. It's a code that started in Victoria, but yet, well, the AFL was the VFL. Let me say it that way. Because South Australia had the SANFL, South Australian National Football League. The Waffle is in Western Australia. So the code is played in other states as well. However, the AFL has grown out of the VFL in terms of a competition structure. And so you have teams that have gone through, obviously, and Collingwood is one of those teams, and others that have joined to make it, you would say, the national code in winter, because it's played in all the states in such a way. Now, people who are rugby league will say, well, what about the NRL? Well, the NRL is very strong in the eastern seaboard, but not strong. Not strong in Victoria. They have the Storm, of course, but not strong in the west, and doesn't have as large a footprint. However, it still is a vital competition. The television numbers are such that, yeah, it takes on next level. But without that various detail, you might be thinking, why are you telling me all this? Well, hey, I'm just offering you a bit of candy, a bit of extra gravy with the details. The point I'm trying to make is that when the rugby, and we think about what's going to transpire, it's likely to be the small moments. And our analysis, as we think about they need to be strong here, they need to be strong there, it's likely to be those moments. Maybe it's the end of a half, the start of another half. Maybe it's right near the end. Maybe it's something that transpires that you can't necessarily put in a pie chart or put in a file or effectively detail, but it's transpired in the moment. Maybe it's turnover ball. Maybe it's one missed tackle. The difference between winning and losing is so fine with these elite teams, with these elite sides. And I was reminded watching the AFL, both the call at the end or the non-call, but also for the Brisbane Lions who are thinking, what did we do wrong? And yet they gave up 2 goals. They gave up 12 points when there was no time on the clock. And it just required maybe one small effort, and it could have been the difference. So that was sort of my lesson from the AFL. It was a pulsating contest. It was tension there. I watched after the All Blacks on the Saturday, and it was well worth the time that was required. I don't think it would be topped. AFL has there's something quite pulsating about the contests. It's different. It's much more frantic, and that creates, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the visual drama of seeing these bodies flying at a great rate of knots. But it certainly, I find it personally to be invigorating and to be compelling. Some look at it and go, what the heck's happening? It's like spaghetti on a wall. It's going in all different ways, and it doesn't seem to have any form. Some approach NFL that with the same way. However, the difference between NFL and AFL is one is much more dynamic. While there are specific things in the NFL, that's much more convoluted, much more structured, much more defined based on offensive, defensive, and special teams. And so there's much larger reality. The other one on the Sunday, the NRL Rugby League, obviously very closely related to rugby union. But the grand final there was, if you know rugby league, you know state of origin. If I say it was at that level, historic level, not recent level, but historic level, that maybe is enough to indicate what, or indicate the nature of the contest, because it was intense. It was compelling again. It certainly provided everything to the AFL that they had offered. And it was a powerful riposte. Another Brisbane team in the final. You would say probably the number one Brisbane team in terms of all sports, which is Brisbane Broncos. So they travelled to Sydney to take on the Penrith Panthers, a two-time defending champion. Their fourth grand final in a row. They lost the first one. They won two. They were going for a three-peat, which is unprecedented, really. I think it's 30, 40 years or thereabouts. So very hard to do. And they've had a turnover of players, so it's not like it's been the same exact squad right the way through. And it seemed like early in the second half, or getting to midway in the second half, Ezra Mam, young 20-year-old number 6, so standoff. If you know rugby union, think first 5'8" or thereabouts, sort of like that. The 7 is a halfback, and that's more than 9. Although there's sort of, I guess there's similarities, but there was also a wider portfolio maybe, depending on which way you look at it. So Ezra Mam had scored 3 tries in the second half. 3 tries. Halftime, the Penrith Panthers went in leading 8-6. Their 8 points in the first half had sort of been, well, gifted in some respects. Brisbane had made some pretty fundamental errors, pretty weird errors, really. But they scored right on the break. So it was 8-6. And they came out early second half, first 20 minutes, and it was like, shut that gate, because that horse has bolted. That Bronco is gonski. 24 points to 8, 16-point lead, and it's just a matter of holding fort. There was one play in the second half that really stood out to me. And Brisbane were feeling it. The whites of their eyes were as clear and as strong and as firm as maybe they probably would have ever felt. This is it. We're on. We're going to win this. And so they're up 24 points to 8. They're attacking close, maybe 10 metres out. It looks like they're going to score again. One more try and it's over. It's definitely over. You'd know at that point. Pass. Goes to the deck. Penrith players able to come through. Turn it over and then, opportunity lost. But they're still 16 points in front. So let's not like hyperventilate about that. However, Penrith come through and they're able to score. And then they're able to score. And they win the grand final by 2 points with a matter of a couple of minutes to go. On the back of their champion, Nathan Cleary. Young guy, mid-20s, halfback, who just decided to come with the hour, and he was there. I messaged out, champions find a way. They don't always find a way because they have created it, in one sense, out of nothing. It can be the opposition open the door. And I think we saw in the grand final, the NRL grand final, how an opposition can easily open a door, and about your own mistakes and about what's going to happen in the Rugby World Cup. It's not necessarily just about the team that you're going for. One side, it's what the other side will open up and offer by nature of the challenge, by nature of the pressure, by nature of their own humanity. And we saw with Nathan Cleary, the champion for the Penrith Panthers, how there are going to be some players in this Rugby World Cup in these playoff times who have the ability to rise, the ability to stand up, the ability to take that next level above whatever else is surrounding them, and to separate themselves and so win the contest for their team. We've seen that. We've seen the challenge in terms of not just the individuals, but with the team for the All Blacks and having to rise in the knockout time and struggling with the pressure of that moment, because it counts. Everyone knows that it counts, which is why those moments are definitive, which is why the champions are able to say, this is my time. I'm not going to allow fear to take me. It's interesting. There's actually a lot of reflections I could say on this, and I realise the time's getting on, so I'm not going to go too much. Because I think I might do another video, and maybe even in the context of the Collingwood coach. And I think he can teach us a lot. However, those individuals who can look fear in the face, because that's really what it is, fear of failure. Pressure is really a fear of failure, because it's an opportunity. And so why is this opportunity different from another opportunity? Because you know the consequences are so much more, which is why staying in the moment is such a vital reality. And in the World Cup, the Rugby World Cup, the quarterfinals, the semi-finals, and the final, the teams that are able to navigate through each of those stages and stay in the moment and perform when it counts and rise to the occasion, maybe their backs will be against the wall. Maybe after 60 minutes, they'll be down. Their team will be down, and they'll have to find it. That's why adversity is not such a bad thing, because it forces you into that place. After the All Blacks, Twickenham and St. Denis defeats, yes, Namibia, but they had a couple of weeks away, and I think whatever transpires, the All Blacks find success. They'll talk about that time in Bordeaux and what it did for them, because it allowed them, when they were in a corner, they knew that some people were picking Italy to even defeat them, which, again, you look back, an average of 12 points. I think some people were looking at the Wallabies and saying, well, if the Wallabies have gone this way, then the All Blacks play in the same area and the level down, and therefore the All Blacks are just going to follow what the Wallabies are doing, or where the Wallabies are tracking. However, when it came to this stage, they were able to execute where it counts. And it means that people look at that performance, and I do think the Italians were pretty aware after the third try that this wasn't going to go their way. And so I think they, well, you can describe it whichever way you want, but they certainly weren't there in the contest in the way that counted. So make of that what you will. However, the All Blacks were able to stand up and handle the pressure. It's only going to get more for them. But it's only going to get more for probably their opposition as well, Ireland, who haven't made it past the quarterfinals. So it's a fascinating laboratory as we observe all these sides and as they take that next step. France at home versus South Africa, probably. Again, I'm projecting what it will be. I know there's talk about what can transpire, what will happen, but the likelihood is those two matches and the other ones that will take place, well, even though there may not necessarily seem as much on them, for those sides and for the consequences, it absolutely is. You lose, you're out. A nation's hopes and dreams in a rugby context are following through on what you do with your 80 minutes. So, as I looked at the AFL and the NRL and saw what transpired, saw what happened in these 80 minutes, and I got a visual, I guess, lesson once again that both the small moments count and the pressure of the occasion and the ability to rise in the moments and to play it out. Brisbane had thought they'd won, and in the end they'll look back on something I would say that they'll remember for the rest of their lives, and something that will probably haunt them for the rest of their days. So I'm going to leave it there. It's a bit of a reflection, a bit of a, I guess you could say, commentary on what's transpiring, or what's happening in my part of the world, sporting part of the world, not just geographically, NRL, AFL, NRL, but also in terms of a rugby orbit as a Rugby World Cup takes place in France. If you watch those contests, or if you're thinking about that reality, how much, who can handle the pressure, who can mark their moments, who can stay on course throughout the 80, who can look fear in the face and not blink. those are the sides that will probably stand the test of time at this Rugby World Cup. I'm Johnny King.